Izuku Midoriya is just born like any other normal kid. He goes through the first 4 years of his life pretty normally, pretty simply, and pretty basic. Now, this all leads up until he goes to the doctor one day, and the doctor tells him that he has a very unique type of quirk, that his quirk is kind of unrecognizable almost. It's as if he can't really put his finger on it exactly what it is, because it's kind of a culmination of being able to kind of imagine things into real life, but also a culmination of what seems to be a video game. He's not 100% sure what video game it is or what it's about, but Inko Midoriya would chime up and say that the only video game her son plays is something called Minecraft, in which this is when the doctor nods his head and says, well, it might be related, it might not be related. He is not 100% sure, because he's actually not super intertwined with the whole gaming type of scene. Now, he does say, go home, imagine some things up, think about some things, and use some key components within that video game to your advantage. Try to maybe make some sort of item, maybe try to eat some sort of food. He doesn't know. Something. Just try something. In which Izuku shrugs his shoulders and he thinks to himself, you know what? Why not? Let's give it a shot, right? Let's give it a shot. So when he's young, around 4 years old, he starts messing around and tries to activate this quirk, right? He tries to activate it. And eventually a screen would show up in front of him and he would be completely shocked, because it's as if it was an imaginative type of thing. He was just imagining a screen or the inventory screen to show up in front of him. He would see his character or himself, right? The little Izuku Midoriya. Then he would see an inventory. Then he would also see a 2x2 grid of crafting space. He would be pretty interested at this, and he would be a little bit taken back. He would be wondering what this is all about. Like, how does this work? But then he would realize something. He would see that he could also click deeper within the kind of inventory screen, and he sees all of these different things, very similar to one creative mode. Now, he does kind of look at himself and he wonders, well, creative mode normally makes me invincible, so maybe I'm invincible. So he runs over to a tree and runs into it and realizes very quickly that he's not invincible, and probably far from it. He gets a bit of a headache and he thinks, oh, well, it probably shouldn't just straight up run into a tree again, but maybe there's a world where he eventually becomes invincible, but that's kind of beyond the point. Now, he does, well then, kind of mess with some things and kind of starts messing around in the backyard. He gets different items. We're talking building blocks and other items like that. He even builds himself a tree house in his literal backyard. And it's not like Minecraft though. When he starts placing these blocks, yes, they are in the format of a blocky figure, but once he's finished with the work and once he's finished entirely, he sees that, well, it turns very, very similar to, well, what something would look like in real life. It loses the kind of blocky like structure and kind of loses its square like area, and it seems like in his own imagination he can kind of change things. So yes, they are blocky initially, but when he changes it in his own mind, it actually becomes very well normalized, right? So he has like a treehouse in his backyard now, and he's thinking to himself, wow, this is pretty freaking insane. Like, how is he able to do something like this? Like, this is completely wild. He doesn't understand how this works, but this is awesome. And then he gets something in his head. He runs inside and he goes to talk to his mother, Inko Midoriya, and he tells her that look what he built outside. It's a tree house. They run out there and she thinks this is awesome. Don't get me wrong. She thinks this is amazing, that the structure is beautiful, and frankly, it's honestly better than the house that they have probably in their their own home, and it's just in the little in their little backyard. But she tells them, well, the reality is they're gonna have to take it down, at least for now. Don't get me wrong, she loves it, but also tells him that if he's able to do something like this, maybe they should think about doing something a little bit on a grander scale. And when she explains to him what they should do, he thinks this is an amazing idea. He thinks that, well, they should sell whatever they have, get a little plot of land, and he can build them an actual house. He can build them at least a temporary house, and then maybe even tear it down and build them a bigger house, however big they want it. And they can put whatever they want in there based on what Izuku has. In which, this is when Inko thinks this is a fantastic idea. So they go out, they sell some stuff, and Izuku even figures out that he can actually basically spawn in diamonds and stuff like that. So let's just say they are filthy rich, and they could basically, well, choose to go buy themselves, a house if they wanted to, go buy whatever house they want. But they decide to, you know what, let's go get a plot of land and let's go build something. So they both actually build together. Izuku able to actually give his mother like different items and things to kind of put down. And eventually they make a house. And this house is a pretty easy build. Like Izuku, it doesn't take very, very long for Izuku to place everything down. And obviously they'll have like a temporary place as well, at least for the moment. And yes, a 4-year-old Izuku is literally building a home in a matter of like a day for his mother and himself. So they build this area, right? They have a nice house. They frankly have a lot of money. She doesn't have to work anymore. And Izuku starts thinking, with these powers, he could truly be the hero that he wants to be. A hero like All Might. That's what he wants to be like. That's who he wants to be. And he starts thinking, how does he get to that point? How is he going to do it? Well, he's not sure. So he decides that he's going to go out through the rest of his life kind of like normal. He continues to mess with the Minecraft stuff, continues to sell diamonds and make a bunch of money, tries to slow down a little bit just because he doesn't want to get, in any trouble or anything like that. You don't want to like mess with the economy so much that it ruins everything. And his mother even would bring this up to him. So they would live comfortably, let's say. They have no problem with money. If he needed hero equipment, he can get it, so on and so forth. He would even get to the point where his quirk would kind of spread word, or it would spread word a little bit to different organizations. And they would ask for his help in terms of like needing materials or stuff like that, which they would then give him either money or give him scholarships that would allow him to, for the most part, be ready for hero work, give him training and stuff like that, in which Izuku starts, well, around the age of maybe 10, 11, or 12, starts actually getting more into training. Now, he doesn't train a ton, he doesn't like work out a ton, but what he does do is he has a ton of stuff in his inventory at all times. And what he doesn't know and subconsciously doesn't understand is that just having stuff in his inventory is basically making it so that his body is adjusting to the natural weight of everything in his inventory. If he has stacks and stacks of diamond blocks in his inventory, his body is substantially just changing. It's adjusting and changing entirely to how much just strength his body could potentially have, right? So he continues to kind of just generate more and more power without even realizing it. And eventually he would get to the point where, yes, he has full control over his unrelenting strength and power and whatever you can think of, right? But at the same time, when he gets angry, he finally sees what his power truly is like. Because Bakugo would be berating him, saying that he's never going to be like All Might. That the only person that's going to get close to being like All Might is himself, is Bakugo, right? That's what he's saying. He's like, oh, I'm the only person that's going to be even close to someone like him. In which Izuku gets mad about this. And when he's walking away, he would nudge his shoulder on the wall on accident. And he would shatter the wall into pieces. Not the whole wall, but like part of it where the doorway is, and he would be completely shocked. Luckily, he's able to patch it up pretty damn quickly because that's just, his quirk has that kind of power, and he is able to patch it up. But Bakugo is shocked to see this. I mean, that thing must have been weak, right? Like, there's no way he was able to just walk into it and obliterate it. But no, Izuku's body has changed quite a bit, and his strength is on a totally different scale. We're talking, he has borderline super strength, if not more than that. We've seen on multiple occasions how heavy some of these things are in terms of in Minecraft, and Izuku would be given or basically feeling the strength of that specifically. and he would be getting these everlasting effects that in Minecraft wouldn't really necessarily have. But in the real world, it massively helps Izuku. And the inventory itself has no weight limits, so he's basically training on massive amounts of weight that he doesn't even know is there. And on top of that, he's able to kind of configure different weaponry if he so chooses to do so. And he basically makes awesome stuff like swords and pickaxes and stuff like that, right? He can make cool items like that. Now, this would lead him to kind of just continuing on with his schooling and stuff like that, and eventually it would become the day where the teacher tells everybody that Izuku and Bakugo are trying out for UA, and that, well, he knows that everybody just wants to be a hero, and there's really no point in talking about anything else, which is, fair, because this is a world full of heroes and a world where everybody wants to be a hero. So it doesn't surprise anybody that that is the main goal, and that is the goal, or basically the only goal that these kids have, right? Now, this would lead to kind of a whole, ruckus of, Bakugo telling Izuku not to even try, blah, 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 blah. But Izuku doesn't listen. He kind of is just over it at this point. So he eventually leaves, and he heads under a bridge where he's writing in his journal. And this is where things will actually take a bit of a change for Izuku. Because when the sludge villain would arrive and is about to attack him, this is where Izuku's not afraid of this sludge villain. Not one singular bit. He thinks to himself, okay, what can he use in his inventory or in his creative inventory now? Yes, he could try to fight the thing, right? He could try to fight with his sword or something like that. Or he could put maybe blocks in front of him. Maybe obsidian blocks that can protect him, and he wouldn't be able to get to him. Or he could do something like this, which he pulls out glass bottles, in which the sludge villain laughs at him, saying that's not going to work. In which Izuku laughs and says, you know what, he's right. And then he pulls out a bucket, and the sludge villain laughs even more. I mean, just because you increase the size of the capacity of the item doesn't mean it's gonna mean anything. But as the sludge villain charges at him, Izuku would basically swoop his bucket at the sludge villain, and immediately the sludge villain would be sucked into the bucket in one foul swoop and would be stuck there, unable to move, and almost solidified to a point where he's kind of just stuck and unable to move entirely. In which this is shocking for the sludge villain. All you see is the two eyes of the sludge villain and the mouth, and he's talking to Izuku, asking how he did that and what kind of freakish powers does he have. Izuku laughs as he holds the bucket, and eventually All Might would arrive, seeing that there is no villain, in which he would ask the kid, hey, have you seen this villain, his big green monster, whatever, right? In which Izuku is freaking out that it's All Might, so much so that All Might eventually just realizes that the thing is in the bucket. In which All Might grabs the bucket and says, is he okay? Is everything all right? And which Izuku says, yeah, everything is all right. He just captured this sludge villain in a bucket. In which Izuku is standing there, with a smile on his face, but All Might's confused. How the hell did you do this in a bucket? That's it? Really? Just a bucket? In which he just nods his head. Yeah, just a bucket. That's all it took. In which, of course, this is very confusing and a very odd thing, and not something All Might was expecting. But hey, cool. All Might nods his head and tells him that he did a hell of a job, and he hopes to see the kid very soon, maybe in UA High School or something like that. He wishes the best for him. In which Izuku asks him that he knows that his quirk is odd and kind of very unique, but can he still be a hero like him? In which All Might would nod, saying that the kid, if he could do what he just did right now, swoop in and just save the day like this, he could be a hero just like him. If not, maybe better than him. All Might would then leave, and Izuku would be happy to hear this. I mean, this is awesome. All Might just gave him recognition. All Might just told him that he could be a hero. This is amazing. In which the next 10 months would be full of just training for Izuku, but Izuku would feel just energized, would feel just absolutely just ready. he would feel like a different version of himself. He'll be training hard. He'd be working hard. He doesn't need to work on his strength, so he tries to work on his speed. He carries all these items in his inventory that is supposed to weigh him down, but it doesn't really feel like it, and he begins running. For days, he would run. And as he does this, his speed, his natural speed, becomes superhuman. Same thing with his strength. He continues to do this over and over again. And on top of this, he begins to basically organize a kit for him that he believes he'll need for the exam. Now, what does he think he'll need? Well, a strength potion wouldn't hurt, maybe multiple. Speed potions, they won't hurt, right? Maybe some sort of healing-like potions could be beneficial. Maybe some netherite armor, maybe a good sword, maybe something along those lines, maybe even an axe. So he starts kind of picking out these things, and he even starts like kind of making a mental note of, okay, like eventually he wants to start enchanting items, but it seems that he's unable to actually gain experience points. Maybe there's a way to do that. Maybe he'll have to defeat villains, but he does have a little bit of an experience points. It seems like he has 5 experience points, or 5 levels of experience, excuse me. And it's a very odd thing, and he then realizes that it must have been from the sludge villain. Capturing, defeating, killing, which obviously they don't want to kill, but capturing, defeating villains, maybe that gives him experience that would allow him to actually enchant. But then he thinks to himself, well, what about the enchanting bottles, right? Bottles of enchanting. He tries to use them, but when he throws them on the ground, it seems like the transfer to the new world is kind of awkward, right? It doesn't really work the way he thinks it's going to work. So then he thinks, okay, what about like spawning in monsters? Then he's about to spawn one in and then thinks to himself, maybe that's not the best idea in the world right now, because if he spawns in a monster and then he can't kill the monster, they might be having a bad thing on their hands. So maybe he should hold off on that, at least for the moment. So he decides that he's going to wait. He knows that there are friendly monsters that he could definitely utilize. So maybe he can tame some wolves, but maybe that's a future thing. Maybe he doesn't want to really mess with that right now. But he gets everything prepped, everything ready. And after the 10 months of training, just solidifying what his quirk does and just working out as much as possible is over, Izuku is ready for the UA entrance exam. Now, the UA entrance exam is very simple. You have your very written, or your very first written portion of the exam, and then you have the practical. Now, the practical is very simple in terms of you have to defeat robots. You have to defeat them, destroy them, however you want to say it, right? And Izuku, he feels like he's ready. The written portion, it's a little bit of a struggle. He had some time to study and he worked hard, but there's a little bit of a struggle there. And then on top of that, when he would go to the practical portion, this is where things are, well, changing. He begins to drink his potions, get ready, pulls out his sword, and then even puts on some armor. And everybody is confused, like, how is he able to, or why is he allowed to have these outside things? And where the hell is he even keeping them? In which the PA or the announcer, which would be President Mike, would say to not worry about other students, that all quirks have been cleared, and some quirks are more unique than others. So don't be surprised if you see some odd things. In which Izuku would just shrug his shoulders, saying that does make sense. This is a very odd thing, so he gets it. Then he would pull out a crossbow, and this crossbow would be loaded up with something a little bit interesting, being that of fireworks. It seems like this crossbow is ready to go, and his sword and all of this stuff is ready to go, and he feels extremely fast and extremely strong. The gates would swing open and he would race off, and everybody would be shocked to see that he's running hella fast, right? He is running extremely fast. Now, it's not on the level of like some speedster or anything like that, but they never expected somebody like him, just some normal lad, some normal dude, to just sprint off and be like super quick. He begins slicing through the robots, right? Boom, one after another, over and over and over again. And as he does this, he can see his experience bar going up and up. This is perfect. This is going to give him experience, give him the ability to enchant items, and make him even more stronger, or even stronger. So he continues to mow through them. He even shoots his crossbow off, destroying multiple at one time, where the arrow, or the firework arrow, would kind of hit a robot and it would explode. And it would basically make this huge explosion that would destroy multiple robots at once. So he would make sure that, nobody's in the crossfire, but he would destroy that as well. Then this would lead to kind of a bunch of destruction of robots, and then eventually the 0-point robot would appear. He would see the 0-point robot and think, maybe it's best for me to just head out. Like, I'm not going to try and fight this thing. He goes to walk away and sees that a girl is calling for help. Some girl underneath a rubble or a bunch of rocks. So Izuku just goes over there immediately, and he just basically pushes all the rocks and all this everything off of her almost instantly. Extremely strong. I mean, it's obvious that he's extremely strong, so he just immediately pushes off of her, and he throws a splash potion of healing on her, in which it completely heals her and more or less makes it so she can run on her own as well. He helps her up, and they both run away from the 0-point robots as Izuku watches the 0-point robot chase them and chase them and chase them, but then eventually he would stop. The 0-point robot would stop, and it seems it stops because the entirety of this, exam is actually over. Since the exam is over, everybody cheers and everyone's happy. Everyone's happy that it's done. And Izuku asks the girl if she's okay, in which she's fine, and asks him, how did he do that? Like, seriously, he seems so strong, so fast already, but he already has like some sort of healing powers as well. In which Izuku puts his hands up and says, sort of, not exactly though, right? It's not 100% the way you think it is, but he says it's something like healing, right? It's a little bit confusing. It's kind of magical, but it's something like that. In which he asks if she's feeling okay, in which she says that she's a little sore. He throws another one at her, and it completely gets rid of all the soreness, her being hurt at all, and completely entirely. He says that these are not always the most effective, right? Sometimes you'll need 2 or 3 to be fully in full health once again. And sometimes, depending on the circumstance, you might need a ton of them or they won't work at all. And that's just the reality of it. It depends on the situation. In which Izuku waves her off and tells her that it was a pleasure meeting her, in which they exchange names, and he walks off. And after some time would pass, Izuku would be awaiting the letter from Yue, and that letter from Yue would eventually arrive. Now, this letter would be just a sigh of relief for Izuku Midoriya. Izuku would see it, and he would see a hologram of All Might appear, telling him that he made it, that he is in Class 1A, and that he's proud of him, that he met him under that bridge when he caught the sludge villain. And the kid, well, he knew the kid was going to be great. He knew the kid had so much potential. And he's proud to say that he is the #1 student out of all the first years. In which Izuku would freak out. He would be celebrating, and he'd be chanting, and he'd be so happy that he's the #1 student. But he also knows that being the #1 student puts a target on your back. It tells people that you are the best. And if he wants to hold that, and he wants to hold onto the idea that he is the best, then he needs to make sure that he can carry on that mantra and carry on the factor of being the best. Now, this is when Izuku, a day after, would head off to his first day of UA High School. Izuku Midoriya would be ready for his first day. He would enter the classroom, he would sit down, and he would be prepared. Whatever's to come, whatever's going to happen, he is ready. He pulls out his notebook, or it's more or less a book and quill, but it kind of converts into a notebook and pen when he brings it into the real world, and he begins to write things down. He writes first day of UA, and he's ready. That he's ready to go and ready to do whatever is necessary. And as he awaits the arrival of his teacher and, well, everybody else, everybody would storm in, they would be talking, everybody would be loud. And even the girl that he basically saved would be kind of talking loud and basically thanking him over and over again about being such an amazing person and blah, blah, blah. This eventually would lead to Aizawa showing up, telling them all to shut their mouths and saying that he has a test for them all, a Quirk assessment test. And since the, green-haired guy, Izuku Midoriya, is the number one student, which that's what he is, the number one student in the first years, which Bakugo would scoff at, saying that he's nothing compared to him, in which Izuku would shake his head, but Aizawa would tell Bakugo that it seems like he's a lot better than him because he is number one and Bakugo's not. They would all go outside and Izuku would await whatever the first challenge is, and he would have to throw a ball. Now, how is he going to throw the ball? Well, shoot, he can do it a couple ways. He can shoot it in his crossbow, maybe shoot it with a bow and arrow, or he can just throw it. And when he throws it, he throws that thing and it's gone. He throws that thing almost to space borderline because of how strong his body really is. And it goes, we're talking borderline almost to space. And it's basically done and dusted. Bakugo would go next, but he wouldn't even get close to Izuku. Like, not even a fraction of what Izuku can do or did. And everybody kind of goes throughout their testing. Now, this testing is a bit more serious, though, because Aizawa says that if you get last place, you are completely out of here. Like, you are getting kicked out of UA, you're going to be expelled, and blah, blah, blah. And Izuku goes through, the ball throw, the speed test, the grip strength. He passes them all, if not gets number one in almost every single one of them. And eventually it leads to, the expulsion of Hagakure, or Invisible Girl. But the very next day, when they're all gathered together ready for their next assignment or their next hero training lesson, when All Might is about to come in, Hagakure would actually come in and she would be unexpelled. Because that was a whole ruse and the whole thing that Aizawa kind of sets into place in his own little way. Now, All Might would walk in and he would tell them all that they're going to be doing hero training, and this hero training would involve heroes versus villains. They all head off and they all get ready. They get on their hero outfits and so on. Izuku actually just kind of donning something pretty basic and thinking that, he'll probably just put on like armor, so he doesn't have to worry about anything too cosmetic, and in which he actually does find a way to make it so he actually looks a certain way with his armor on. So instead of it just being, his armor, right, he has his hero suit. But this hero suit is a little bit more tacky, right? You have a way nicer, so more advanced version of the first one he ever got. And it's obvious because they got money, man. They got a ton of money. So there's no point of, doing some lame kind of weird custom job, right? You get a nice one, a nice suit, and a suit ready for some action, ready to take on, his first challenge, which would be Bakugo and Tenya Ida as the villains and him and Ochako as the heroes. Now, the plan is very simple. Izuku was thinking to himself, okay, so what's the best way to go touch this bomb? Now, if you want to go touch the bomb, it's very basic. You got to go look through the windows, look through different areas, and Izuku thinks to himself he could go fight Bakugo, or he could get him even more angry and just ladder up, or just ladder up with Ochaku Uraka and find exactly where the bomb is, in which that's exactly what they do. They use ladders and they put stuff at the bottom like slime blocks and stuff like that, so that if, they do fall, they'll fall and they won't, be hurt like at all. So they kind of look around, move around, and they even use like these levitation potions for the most part, just in case. And eventually they find the exact spot where the bomb is. They are right at the glass, and Izuku and her stand right on a block right next to the where the bomb is. They smash the glass and they touch the bomb. Easy peasy, just like that. In which this is a shock for Bakugo and Tenya. Tenya not even hearing them outside. Bakugo pissed that Izuku won't fight him, and they just shrug their shoulders and they head back down. Izuku is done just like that in a matter of around 30 to 40 seconds. He's able to seize the bomb and just, in turn defeating the villains, right? They're able to touch the bomb and end the whole training session, in which everybody is pretty shocked by this, and All Might gives his kind of recognition to the fact that it was very efficient and quick work, and there is no complaints or any complaints that could be said. But Bakugo says, hell with that. Like, there's complaints. He's pissed that Izuku wouldn't fight him, but but All Might tells him that that's not what this training session was about. It wasn't about fighting each other. It was about finding the best way to stop the villains from doing what they were doing. And that's what they did, just like that. Quicker the better, and the more efficient the better as well. In which, of course, this would be pissing off Bakugo for a while, but they would kind of sit there through kind of a lot of what happened and a lot of what's going to happen with the other heroes versus villains events. Now, this would lead them to kind of finishing up, and then a couple days later they take on what they know as the USJ, which is more or less a rescue facility. But what they don't know is that this rescue facility is going to be flipped on its head when the villains of the League of Villains invade. And Izuku is going to have his first chance to truly show off what he's capable of and what his quirk, his Minecraft quirk, is truly capable of. But for now, that will be the end of part 1 of What If Deku Had a Minecraft Quirk. Izuku Midoriya and his class is about to take on the USJ, or the rescue facility. Now, this rescue facility is under siege of who we know as the League of Villains. The League of Villains is a very, very notorious group, at least at this point, and they are terrifying. They have very, very, very large sway, but they're scary because of one person and one person really only, being that of All For One. All For One has run this League of Villains and continues to run it, and now these young heroes are going to have to deal with it, and, well, Izuku Midoriya is going to have to deal with it. So this is when Izuku and his entire class would head into the USJ. They would be told that, it's all about this rescue training and this or that, but then bam, portals would open up and people would come out of nowhere and they would begin invading. Izuku immediately would react to this and would think to himself that they need to somehow survive and they need to somehow fend off these villains. So what are they going to have to do? What are they going to do is the big question. And that's exactly what we're going to get into, because Izuku begins immediately with trying to help Aizawa basically face down these villains. And of course, Aizawa is hesitant and tells the kid to not do this, and that he's not going to be allowed to help fight. In which Izuku, he's okay, I get it. But then he kind of ignores Aizawa and jumps into action anyways. He begins to use something known as an elytra and begins to fly around. As he flies around, he begins to rocket everywhere, just kind of observing the area. But then he would begin to see Aizawa fighting, the villains, and he would begin helping them out, shooting these kind of rockets out of his crossbow and just laying waste to a bunch of these villains. Not killing them necessarily, but let's just say hurting them pretty damn bad, right? He would be raining just basically hellfire on them, and he would continue to do so over and over again, clearing out a large group of the villains. On top of that, he would fly around the entire facility, helping anybody who got sucked up into a portal and taken away as well. So he would help everybody out as much as possible, all the way up until he flies around to see that Aizawa is about to get attacked by something known as a Nomu. This Nomu is about to punch Aizawa square in the face, and as he does, well, Izuku would just fly in trying to swoop up Aizawa, but he's unable to do so, at least not quick enough. So he realizes that he needs some help fighting this Nomu. So who does he call on? Well, he decides that he's going to start spawning iron golems, something he hasn't really even tested out, but thinks that this is the best time for reinforcements. He spawns a bunch of iron golems, and then they begin to try and basically cut down the Nomu. But the iron golems, I'm gonna be honest, don't really do a ton to the Nomu because of the quirks that it maintains. But nonetheless, the iron golems give him enough time to heal Aizawa and actually help him massively, and actually buff him up in terms of strength, splashing a potion of strength, speed, regeneration, all of these things on them so that he can continue fighting. And this makes it so Aizawa is quite a bit stronger. Izuku even hands him a weapon if he wants to utilize it, but Aizawa shakes his head, saying that that's really not his style. He can't really use it that well. Aizawa would ask what the hell those things are, in which Izuku would tell him those are iron golems, that it seems like they're doing, decently well against All For One, and, well, let's just say he hopes to have some better things in the future in terms of, stuff that is pretty helpful. But for now, that's all he can really muster up, at least at the moment. So they begin to fend off this Nomu, but also fend off Shigaraki and Kurogiri, both being actually subdued relatively easily with a healthy Aizawa and a buffed up Aizawa at that. Izuku actually even begins to throw potions of weakness on the Nomu and also Shigaraki and Kurogiri, making their quirks actually weaker than usual, and on top of that making them more vulnerable to attacks, making it so that actually the iron golems survive a little bit longer and actually do a little bit more damage to the Nomu himself. But the real kicker and the real end of it all, which would be, the arrival of All Might. All Might would arrive and be ready for a fight. All Might would arrive and fend off the Nomu and would basically use this potion of weakness and the opening from the iron golems to subdue the Nomu really quickly. Izuku didn't even really get a chance to fight the Nomu hand to hand or even, sword to hand, but he didn't really want to test the theory of how strong he truly is. He knew that the Nomu was extremely powerful. He knew how strong he really was, or whatever that creature was, so he didn't want to kind of cross that boundary and be unsafe about it. So he was trying to be as safe as possible, waiting for potential reinforcements and stalling out the Nomu as much as possible. And luckily, that's exactly what happened and exactly what worked. But as Izuku is going to basically try and capture Shigaraki and Kurogiri, they would leave without even a single trace and would even leave behind the Nomu, believing that it seems as if they have issues beyond just All Might now, seemingly realizing how strong some of these students currently are. But they also don't understand the powers that Izuku actually holds, and they don't understand what he can actually do, and that's a big issue for the League of Villains. Because yes, they saw what he could do in terms of, he was flying around and stuff like that, but it looked like he had technology. It looked like it was more support than anything. And yes, they weren't prepared for that, but what the hell was going on? Like, seriously, what the hell was going on? He was able to spawn different things, like they just appeared out of nowhere. Maybe that's some sort of power he has. He's not 100% sure, but the information is limited on this kid. They just know that he's pretty well off in terms of money and that he stood one hell of a chance against actual villains, which is something Shigaraki feels a little bit uneasy about. But of course, All For One would let him settle, and All For One would tell him that they have a plan for it all and to not worry a single thing. Now, this would lead to the school being forced into a bit of a couple-day vacation and recovery time because, well, they are dealing with a villain invasion and they are dealing with some very sketchy things that just occurred. So they have some downtime. Class 1A has a little bit of a break, but they're all prepping and preparing for, well, the UA Sports Festival. Something that is very exciting and something that Izuku will have massive advantage in, and he'll have to even do a little speech as well, in which when the UA Sports Festival, begins, he begins to give his speech, telling them all that everybody's going to try their best, and they're going to all try their best to, well, win. And that's exactly what he wants to do. He wants to win. At the end of the day, he doesn't want to sit here. He doesn't want to, lose. He wants to win it all. And he hopes that everybody gives their best of efforts as well. And he hopes everybody is ready for an absolute challenge. In which Izuku hears cheers and everybody's cheering everyone on. Everyone's happy, saying that this is great. Like he's so humble and stuff like that. And Izuku is happy to see that everybody's excited for what's going to happen, right? Everybody is excited for what's going to occur. And Midnight would announce that the first event is an obstacle course race. Now, the obstacle course race is going to be pretty basic for Izuku. He just puts on his elytra and he takes off flying and just leaves everybody in the dust, but to the point where he actually straight up is faster and done with the whole race in a matter of maybe 30 seconds, maybe even quicker. depending on how much ground he can really cover, in which Izuku covers that ground extremely fast, and everybody's standing there like, whoa, like what did he just do? What kind of technology was that? Like that technology could be revolutionary, but of course Izuku didn't actually make this technology. This technology itself is from a video game, so he's kind of, iffy on actually giving it to anybody else, but it's still technology that is extremely high tech. And well, let's say Mei Hatsume is very interested in this technology, especially because she believes that this could be her ticket to making a ton of money and being basically famous and so on, right? And just continuing on with making her babies, which that's her machines or her technology, we all know. Now, he would pass or get the first in the obstacle course race, but this would put a massive bounty on Izuku's head. But this bounty, I'm gonna be honest, doesn't really matter much, because a lot of stuff that Izuku can do, well, it's gonna benefit him in this next thing, which would be the cavalry battle. Now, he would have limited people to choose from. He would end up going with people like Tokiyami, people like Ochako, Mei Hatsume, and stuff like that. And then eventually what he would do is he would tell them that they need to be patient and be ready and to jump when he says to jump. Now, as he says this, they're a little bit confused, but he puts on a kind of a levitation potion, and a potion that would allow them to float, at least for the moment, about 30 seconds. And he would begin to basically spam blocks underneath their feet, and it would build this giant pillar. And as the levitation potion would stop, he would tell them to land on the block and to be careful, in which they would do just that, landing on the block. And the block's pretty big, so it's not like they're trying to, barely land on it. And then Izuku would build a little structure, and they would just sit down. They're not out of bounds. They're not, doing anything illegal, and literally nobody can touch them, and it's an automatic win. In which Mei is immediately convinced that this kid is some sort of special technological whiz, which she doesn't know, but it's absolutely insane. Like, how the hell is he able to do these things? How is he able to place these odd-looking blocks? How is he able to make them float? Like, this doesn't even make sense. This defies all laws of gravity. Like, seriously. Like, people would pay good money to have, structure that can float. Like, that is absolutely insane. In which Izuku kind of shrugs his shoulders, saying that he doesn't really understand the nitty-gritty and the details, you could say. But, hey, they're here, and it works. Which he kind of just shrugs them off on it, because he doesn't really know how to explain his own quirk as well. Like, this is very confusing for him too, right? So Izuku kind of just tells him, hey, he does his best, he does what he can with what he can work with and stuff like that. Which they would win the cavalry battle, and even everybody in the audience would be shocked, a little bored, but also kind of impressed, right? Because yes, it was a little boring. He kind of just sat up there, but it was also impressive that Izuku has a plethora of things that allow him to, for the most part, just be ready for almost every situation. And that would even include something like the 1-versus-1 battles. Because in terms of raw strength, raw power, durability, and stuff like that, Izuku's ready for it. And he goes one-on-one with someone like Shinso. He's ready to take on Shinso immediately. And since people really do like Izuku, like he's a pretty cool dude, they do tell him that basically Shinso can brainwash you. That for the most part, that's what the guy does. So once he gets that information, he easily is able to defeat Shinso, and swiftly does it. Doesn't even really need armor like that, right? Izuku's pretty skilled in hand-to-hand combat, nothing crazy, but he kind of just for the most part, whacks him, and then it's kind of over. He makes sure that he doesn't hurt the guy super bad, but he does whack him and get him out of there pretty quickly. But his next battle is going to be a far tougher one, especially when he has Endeavor, the father of Todoroki, telling him that he needs to get his son to use his fire side, and that he will give him what he wants and give him maybe an agency spot or something like that if he does do this. Izuku says that he'll do, whatever. Like, he doesn't really care to try and help Endeavor necessarily. Like he's going to help his so-called friend out, and he's going to make sure that he gets the most out of him. But it's not because of Endeavor. It's not because he's trying to make him, be a better parent and, have this bond once again. Like, he doesn't care, right? He wants to make that very known. And at the end of the day, Izuku makes it very clear that he's not doing it for him, he's doing it for Todoroki. So, what do they do? And what happens? Well, Izuku goes head-to-head with Todoroki, and he tries to make him use his fire side. But, of course, this isn't the easiest thing in the world, and he kind of struggles to do so. And the ice powers that he has, well, they're pretty damn impressive, and they're actually kind of hard for Izuku to deal with. Now, physically and stuff like that, in terms of speed, and he's able to kind of burst through the ice, but he does get a slow-like effect on him, and he just kind of slows down entirely when he gets hit by the ice, or when he gets really cold, or stuff like that. And frankly, it's a little bit annoying, just a little bit, but nonetheless, he's still able to power through it with how fast and strong he really is. And he even tells Todoroki, like, he's going to need more than just this, and that he's not going to win with what he's using. And there's multiple reasons for that, because, well, Izuku himself, he's not just some powerhouse running at you full steam ahead, right? He could use other means. And Izuku begins to shoot and fly around with his elytra. He begins to shoot his arrows at Todoroki, making it extremely hard for Todoroki to even touch him. And Izuku tells him that he's going to have to give it his entire all, and even his all might not be good enough. And that's just the reality, and that's the reality of this world, in which Todoroki would get kind of frustrated by this, but then he would realize that he really does need to utilize this other side of him. He needs to utilize his fire side, and that's what he does. He utilizes his fire side, blasting a large just blast of fire and ice at Izuku, but the fire side is the only part that actually hits him, and it covers Izuku entirely. Everybody is in a standstill. There's no way. He landed a full blast of that fire on him directly. I mean, that's going to kill the kid. He's dead. There's no way. But as the fire would dissipate, Izuku wouldn't even be touched. Izuku would begin to laugh at Todoroki and say that he was waiting for him to use this fire side, but he was also prepared for the fire side, showing something that looks like an odd looking potion that Izuku actually splashed on himself right before it hit him, being that of a fire resistance potion. Izuku says that this potion itself is enough to allow him to swim in lava. That's how strong it is. In which he tells him that the fire side was never going to do something to him, but he wanted to see what Todoroki was truly capable of, and he wanted to see, well, what kind of level he was truly at. Todoroki would then be in complete shock, so much so that Izuku would dash at him and knock him out of the ring. This would lead Izuku to basically beating Todoroki, and everybody celebrating and cheering Izuku on, and his next battle would be against Tenya Ida. But this fight would be nowhere near as difficult as the Todoroki one, because of the slowness of the the ice and stuff. And after this fight, he would finally have a chance to take on his childhood bully by the name of Bakugo. Bakugo would be excited but also angry at the same time, he wanting to smash Izuku to the ground. But what he doesn't know is that this fight in itself was over the day that they basically both got their quirks. Izuku, well, he knows that Bakugo stands no chance, and it's not even a close one, as Izuku would approach him and tell him that this armor that he holds, the armor that he has on him, well, let's just say is going to make it so he's utterly useless. Izuku watches as Bakugo tries to shoot him with explosion after explosion, but not even a scratch on Izuku, not even a little tiny scratch. Izuku would walk toward him and tell him that it seems like he's the useless one right now. All the bullying, all the making fun of, all the teasing, and all the messing with, it's all over now. Because Bakugo is just that much worse than himself. He's so below Izuku that he doesn't even deserve to be in the same ring as him. Izuku tells him that he might as well walk off the stage now. because this fight is so far over. In which Bakugo tries his best, shooting explosions, even shooting the most giant explosion he possibly can. But no, nothing will work. Izuku gives him a little nod and tells him that, well, it seems like this armor has really helped him quite a bit. Quite a bit. And it's something he's been preparing for quite a while. Something that he didn't even bring up at all. And it's something like, well, explosive resistance. Now, he nods toward Bakugo once again, saying that this was personally made for him. He wasted a lot of experience on this specifically just so that he could do this to Bakugo. Just so that he can understand how far gone he truly is. Everybody's in shock because they never have seen Izuku so serious and so, like, determined. And also, on top of that, so cocky in a way. But it seems like Bakugo really does deserve this, and Bakugo is kicked out of the ring, and Izuku Midoriya is your winner of the UA Sports Festival, just like that. In which everybody celebrates, and Izuku would put away his armor, and he would basically cheer, or basically kind of celebrate with everybody who's currently celebrating as well. Now, with the UA Sports Festival over, a lot of people are on the radar, or Izuku has a lot of people looking at him in terms of agencies and in terms of just trying to get him in their agency, right? Izuku is a hot commodity. Everybody's like, oh, we need to get this guy. This guy, he's a different level. Like, he's a surefire top 10 hero when he graduates. That's how good this guy is, right? We all need to really get him on kind of our side, right? We need to get him ready to go and get him in our agency however we possibly can, because this guy is going to be the next level, next generation of just heroes. At the end of the day, we are now dealing with a new era, and this era is an era that Izuku is going to really live off of, right? Izuku is completely in a different stratosphere, and not even because he's so much stronger than everyone else, because it's not like right now he's not like some All Might level threat or anything, but it's more because of what he brings to the table, right? He has these potions, he has this utility, he has basically the ability to make as much money as he absolutely wants. Like, if he wanted to, he can make his own agency, and that's why, well, Izuku's not too fond of just working with these other agencies, because to him, he wants to actually be the person that runs the agency, right? Like, he wants to be that dude, and that's the type of person Izuku is. I mean, he has the money for it. He can definitely make his own agency, but he just lacks the hero license and stuff like that. But don't get it twisted. People see this as a commodity. Maybe they'll even give Izuku a stake in the agency, kind of give him, you know, like a partial portion of the agency, maybe 20, 30%, shoot, maybe more, depending on the circumstance. But of course, dealing with that and a kid, at the end of the day, we are dealing with a kid. It's something that agencies are going to be not necessarily too interested in chatting about, at least at the moment, right? And Izuku's kind of, you know, in a different mind state and a mindset than everyone else. But still, where can he learn the best from? That's where he's thinking about, and that's what he is thinking about. So when he looks through all of his agencies that reach out to him after the UA Sports Festival, he sees one that really catches his eye, and that's, well, would it be Mirako? And it might sound odd because, well, what does she relate to him at all? But Izuku believes that his weakest aspect is his hand-to-hand combat, and he believes that if he can learn more hand-to-hand combat, that this will more or less massively increase just how good he is for the most part, like how good he truly can be in most, if not all, scenarios. So that's kind of what he's thinking about. That's where the mindset is. And he decides to work with Mirako, and it's hard freaking work because she's kind of a psychopath, he learns. And she doesn't really care about anything involving his special techniques or, oh yeah, like I could do this, I could do that. She doesn't really care. She doesn't. All she cares about is being able to absolutely beat people up, and that's it. That's what she's really good at doing. And frankly, it's something that basically that's going to happen, right? So they go hand to hand, combat a lot, working out together and just boxing and learning new fighting styles. And Izuku does learn her fighting style for the most part. And yeah, it was it's pretty fruitful for the most part, and pretty fruitful just overall. And Izuku just finds kind of progress in this. He finds a lot of progress in kind of just working with Mirako and just getting stronger and getting better at hand-to-hand combat, just in general. Now, this is when they would do a bit of patrolling, and Mirako would decide to take him to Hosu City, actually. And this would be a pretty high crime rate place, and he would believe that, this is probably a good kind of place, or she would think it was a good place for him to kind of learn and get a feel for some of these people, right? Some of these people that are on the worst side of things, that's for sure. And they're not very good people by any means, and they're kind of, the worst of the worst, you could almost say. Hosu City is a pretty bad place, and that's where they knew, and that's where they went. So of course, they would run into some bad people, but what they didn't know they would run into is a lot more than just that. It seems like the League of Villains begin to lay siege to Hosu City in a way, but there's a reason for this. Nomus would begin running wild, and Mirako would help out to her best of her ability, kind of knocking out and subduing as many people as possible. But Izuku would eventually learn and hear of this one person by the name of Tenya Ida, and of course he did fight him, and they're somewhat friends. I mean, they're, here and there. And Izuku knows that there is something going on, something that is, let's just say, not very good, right? Izuku knows that Tenya Ida is hunting down the hero killer, and when he begins searching for him and trying to find basically what's going on and if he can actually help Tenya Ida, he finds him and he's almost dead. Tenya is on the ground with the hero killer's sword about to be plunged into him, and Izuku's able to react to this pretty quickly. He's able to get to the hero killer, and begins to clash swords with the hero killer. Izuku would then throw a potion at the hero killer and then throw another one. As he does these things, the hero killer is confused. What the hell is he throwing on him? And he realizes that he is so much slower and feels so much weaker. On top of this, he would get thrown another potion that would poison the hero killer and hurting him over and over again, and Izuku would go and grab Tenya Ida and try to get out of there. The hero killer tries to actually close the distance and tries to stop Izuku, but again, Izuku stops him in his tracks, pulling out a shield and blocking the attack entirely that is coming his way. Izuku would get basically Tenya to a safe distance, and then eventually he would hear somebody running over the rooftops, and that person would land a clean kick right to the face of the hero killer, being that of Mirako. Mirako would tell him that, she didn't teach him all of those things just for him to throw some silly potions at the guy. And Izuku shrugs his shoulders and says that, habits die hard, and he did what he had to do. In which he does help her for the most part, but Mirako has it handled, especially with a massively weakened, slowed, and poisoned hero killer. The hero killer would be subdued and knocked out. Luckily, Tenya would be healed up very quickly by Izuku with some healing potions, or some instant health potions, and of course he would come to his senses. Mirako would help them all get away from all of this area, and she would tell him that normally he would be in trouble because he is working without a hero license, but they will keep it on the hush and hush, and at the end of the day, she did swoop in and defeat him, so no harm, no foul, right? Izuku would nod and thank her, of course, in which she would point at Tenya Ida, though, and say that whatever he did, though, he's gonna have to be punished for it. Like, seriously. And they're gonna be told, or UA is gonna be told exactly what occurred, at least in terms of what happened with Tenya and what happened even with Izuku, but Izuku should be fine. He won't be in trouble at all. Now, this would lead them down to basically dealing with the punishment of Tenya, and Tenya would be, for the most part, just completely kind of just apologetic for what he did. He realizes now he's being stupid, and Izuku makes it very clear that he was being very stupid. And yes, he gets it. He understands that he was hurting because of his brother and stuff like that. But there could have been things that they could have gotten done. They could have done something. They didn't have to take it to that drastic measure, right? They didn't have to do what he was going to do. He wanted to kill the guy and almost got killed himself. And it's just not something that they wanted to look forward to. But nonetheless, Izuku and everybody else would head back to UA with the internships cut a little bit short. But nonetheless, it would lead them down the path to the final exams leading up to the forest training camp. And well, Izuku is going to be taking on one of the biggest challenges he has to date, and something that he's not going to be expecting after the written portion, and that's with a battle against All Might. But he'll have a partner that he will never want in his life, and that's Katsuki Bakugo. But for now, that's going to have to wait for part 3 of What If Deku Had a Minecraft Quirk. Izuku Midoriya is about to take on his biggest challenge yet, and that is not only partnering with Bakugo or Katsuki Bakugo, it is also taking on All Might. Now, let's make it very clear. Izuku has many things going for him: strength, speed, utility, and so on. But dealing with someone like Bakugo, it might be a little bit difficult, because this guy, he wants to do everything in his power to basically lose. Now, I know that sounds weird, because Bakugo's competitive. All he wants to do is win. But here's the thing. He wants to win so bad by himself that he basically will sabotage them to essentially, or, somewhat lose. But Izuku, in his brain, what he's thinking is he's going to make sure they don't lose. He doesn't know how he's going to do it. He's not sure exactly the way he should approach it, or how he should figure it out, but he's not gonna lose here, and he's gonna make sure he doesn't lose. Now, he doesn't know if he can go head to head with All Might. He doesn't, right? He decides that at the very beginning of the fight, he spawns a bunch of iron golems to help him with All Might. Now, this is a little bit awkward because All Might is a good person, but when he's able to bait All Might into punching one of the iron golems, he's able to get the iron golems to start fighting him. Now, All Might's able to dismantle the iron golems pretty easily, right? It's nothing, no challenge, no big ordeal, but at least gives Izuku some time. And what he's thinking is, well, if I can't beat him, I have to go through the gate to escape. But the issue is trying to make Bakugo do that. Bakugo straight up doesn't listen, and he wants to fight All Might all out. So Izuku tries to help him fight All Might initially, flying around, and he's shooting his kind of like, crossbow at All Might, and he's trying to do different things, but none of it is necessarily working. Izuku even gets to the point where he's forced into hand-to-hand combat, and he actually goes pretty decently well against All Might, especially with his strength potions, resistance, regenerations, and he even throws a weakness potion on All Might, and it seems to slow him down, right? So he's able to kind of keep up with All Might for the most part, and even land some good blows. But here's the thing. He knows that he doesn't want to sit here and fight All Might. It doesn't make sense. It's not the most efficient way of going about things, and he's all about efficiency. And he's going to make sure that, well, Bakugo knows this, because eventually Izuku would look and he would launch something into the air, throwing it as far as he can, but in a way or in the direction of the exit. As he throws this, he's fighting against All Might and also fighting with Bakugo, or at least sort of fighting with him, to the point where Izuku decides to kind of pull out a final little gambit. He begins insulting Bakugo, in which everybody's confused at what he's doing. Why is he insulting Bakugo? In which All Might's confused as well. Well, Bakugo would get so angry, so frustrated, that he would actually attack Izuku. And when he would attack Izuku would grab him, and he would look to the exit as his Ender Pearl was going to land directly on the exit. It lands and it teleports both him and Bakugo to the exit, and essentially they escape from All Might, or escape from the situation or the scenario. Now, This is a bit of an interesting twist because everybody's like, whoa, we didn't know that he could do that. And Izuku kind of shrugs this off, saying there's a lot of things that he could do that, let's just say, haven't been talked about, told, or even dove into, right? He hasn't really shown everybody his entire skill set of capabilities. Izuku holds off on that, and everybody's kind of like in shock that they were able to technically beat All Might, right? They escaped, but they technically won the training session, which is pretty impressive. And on top of that, we even had a point where Izuku was going head to head with All Might, and it was kind of like interesting. Izuku was able to keep up for the most part and even do pretty damn well against All Might. And it's as if Izuku is like superhuman, almost to the point where he kind of is like All Might, right? In that way of being, well, superhuman, right? So they obviously passed the exam, and Bakugo, is a little bit annoyed because he wanted to, obviously fight against All Might. He wanted to like full on, brawl with him, and he believes in his head that they stood a chance and that he could have beaten All Might and blah blah blah. But Izuku says that that's not the most efficient way to approach things. Like, that is ridiculous. Like, he shouldn't do things that are stupid, right? Like, that's a dumb idea. In which Bakugo just ignores him and then eventually would act like he's gonna hit him, and he's get all angry and all angry Pomeranian things, all that stuff. This is when everybody's tests would finally be over. Some would pass, some would fail, stuff like that, right? It's all, in between. Some people do really good, some people do really bad, some people do average and just squeak on by and stuff like that. But nonetheless, everybody is going to go to the forest training camp. Just some people will have to do extra bit of studying and an extra bit of, kind of learning and work overall. Now, as they head over to the forest training camp the very next day, as they're all packed and ready to go, they actually meet the Wild Pussycats, in which when they meet them, well, let's just say the training session is going to begin right now, because they are shoved off a cliff and sent down into the forest, and they're forced to literally fight a bunch of these, like, monsters. These, like, ground-made, earth-made, like, monsters, and they're forced to fight them all. Now, Izuku kind of just glides around, and he can easily defeat monsters like this. Like, he is strong enough to do so just in raw power. He flies around with his elytra, just smashing into them and punching them and slicing them with his sword, or even shooting them with his firework arrows, and he's basically exploding them. And it's pretty basic for him. Maybe even dropping a couple iron golems to help out where they can and stuff like that, right? He does, for the most part, his best to help his classmates out, and eventually they would get through the entirety of the forest, leading them to the actual camp. Now, the camp is a little bit interesting, because Izuku would run into someone by the name of Koda, who would immediately punch him in the nether regions. Not a very nice thing to do, but is something that Koda did do, in which Izuku would be, wincing in pain, but this would then lead them to obviously doing their normal training, right? This training would involve everything that Aizawa believes they need to work on. Now, Izuku is a little bit interesting because there's a lot of stuff that Izuku could work on, but is a lot of unknown things, right? Like, Izuku doesn't know a ton, or a lot of people don't know a ton about Izuku's quirk, and it kind of goes for Izuku as well. Izuku does lack at least a lot of knowledge on his quirk, but he begins to use this time to kind of accelerate the process, look through his quirk, what he can use, what he can do, and so on. Like, he really starts digging into his quirk, and he begins to think to himself, what can he personally use, and how can he change things that are normally one way and make them another? And then he thinks to himself, oh my god, or oh my goodness, I need to immediately get on some sort of tablet, laptop, computer, something, in which they actually do have one there. Not the best reception and stuff like that, the best internet, but he does check it out, and he begins tampering with some things and begins working with some things and begins changing some things. And as he does this, he begins to learn more and more about his quirk and the certain things he could possibly do with it. And some of these things are pretty insane. And the main thing he's thinking about is what he can do about some of these mobs. Some are friendly, some are hostile, some are neutral. Now, how can he change them and how can he utilize them? That's something that he wants to think about and something he really wants to learn. And it's something that he uses or tries to figure out during this training session. Obviously, this would lead to the invasion of the villains on the training camp. Now, this training camp invasion would be more insinuated towards trying to find and defeat All Might. Because, well, there's really no point in kidnapping Bakugo. I mean, yes, there is kind of a feistiness to him and an anger to him, but Izuku beat him pretty handedly, and there wasn't any, like, overarching tantrum in front of everybody. Izuku beating him kind of humbled Bakugo just a little bit, and, well, you know, you gotta deal with what you gotta deal with. And everybody, they kind of they're thinking to themselves, they mostly want to get their hands on All Might, but also they'd settle for their hands on Izuku Midoriya. And Izuku would think to himself when all this is occurring, that if they want him, well, they can have him. Because this is a pretty damn big mistake if they decide to actually do what they're thinking about doing. So Izuku, well, he decides that when all this is said and done and they grab him and they try to take him away, he doesn't fight back. He doesn't try to get away. He doesn't try to save himself. He lets himself get captured. And when he's there and he's in the League of Villains, and when All for One would show his face or lack of face, when he would show up once again, well, they would be standing in front of Izuku Midoriya telling him that he's going to help them or else. Now, Izuku, on the other hand, has plans of his own. Plans that, let's just say, the villains are not ready for. Because they're thinking, well, he can only do basic things, right? He summoned a couple things, but those things were easy peasy, right? All for One's here. We got a couple no-moves. I mean, there's no problems at all. There should be no issues. In which Izuku, well, he thinks quite the opposite. Izuku thinks that this right here was their biggest mistake they could possibly make, especially after some of the things he learned, which is a scary thought that Izuku could get even stronger, or that Izuku could learn things even more that could benefit him in the near future, and that's exactly what's going to happen. Izuku sits there, and they're all thinking, oh, well, you know, he can't do anything, right? He's cuffed, you know, he can't use his quirk, and so on, but they're so wrong. They are so wrong to think that he can't use his quirk because of some simple, very simple kind of machinery, right? Izuku would quickly make it very known that this would not matter, and he would begin to show what he's capable of, and he begins to spawn things around him that normally he wouldn't spawn, but he decides that this is going to be the perfect time to do so and try out what he's been trying out. He spawns some regular mobs in terms of hostile mobs that are regular in terms of skeletons, spiders, creepers, right? And as these things are spawning, everybody is freaking out. Like, what the heck is this Halloween fest? As the creepers would begin to explode the building. But actually, it's a controlled explosion. And these explosions are away from Izuku. It seems like the skeletons and zombies and stuff like that, they're actually not hurting Izuku. It's as if they're under his control, or at least to a certain extent, friendly toward him. Now, they would go out of their way and basically be killed, but, I mean, they're kind of already dead. They are the undead. But they're basically killed for the most part, but they leave a giant hole in this League of Villains kind of base. And when it's destroyed, or partially destroyed for the most part, Izuku looks for an opening for himself. He would jump out of the hole that is made, and he would begin to send a signal, creating a beacon of some sorts and channeling it straight up into the sky, pointing them in the right direction. And now All For One knows that this right here will now be the battleground for their final battle between him and All Might because of what this kid just did. But he will also have to be dealing with Izuku, because Izuku is not giving a single inch. And All For One doesn't realize that he's going to need even more backup, because Izuku spawns a creature that would terrify everybody around, even the heroes that are arriving. This creature would walk toward All For One, 3 heads and all, and it would begin charging up an explosion. It would explode in the League of Villains base. It's incinerating the base itself, and it begins flying toward Izuku, but Izuku would hop on its back and it would begin flying around. Izuku would fly around with it as it shoots basically head or its own head's projections and landing little explosions, and these little explosions would give something known as the Wither effect. And this right here would be known as the Wither. He would be literally flying around on the Wither, and Izuku would be shooting these kind of explosions at All For One, and shooting crossbow arrows and explosions as well, and even shooting them at the League of Villains and subduing them for the most part. All For One sees that All Might is now here, and All Might begins fighting All For One as well. All For One is obviously on the back foot and obviously under massive pressure, and he believes that there is really no way out of this. So what does he do? Well, he decides that he's going to send away Shigaraki so that he can have that final gambit, so he can have that final kind of way of surviving, right? He needs Shigaraki to survive. So he sends Shigaraki off, but he's the only one that gets sent off. Everybody else is swooped up, captured, all the League of Villains members unable to leave. And that's mainly because All For One was unable to maintain his focus with his entourage that is just pursuing and attacking him. Izuku continues his onslaught over and over and over again. So much so that All For One is just overwhelmed, and Izuku begins to actually just throw potions at him to the point where all these potions stack up. The poisons, the weaknesses, the slowness, all of these things stack up, and all of these things wear on All For One to the point where All Might can finish him off with one United States of Smash, and he really doesn't even take that much damage. The League of Villains are all swooped up except for Shigaraki being sent away, but it seems like there's a final idea that Shigaraki has in mind, at least for the moment. Now, he's going to have to find a couple more people, or at least try and save a couple more of these villains, so that, you know, he can continue on with what his plans are going to be in the future. But for now, Izuku is kind of pushed away from all that, and he now would then head back to go to, well, UA High School, but they're actually going to utilize dorms. Now, this is when they actually ask Izuku for some assistance, because these dorms would take quite a while and cost a lot of money. And Izuku decides that, hey, why not? He'll do that. And he decides to help them actually create dorms that are super spacious, super nice, and like completely amazing. Even revamping some of the training facilities just with the mass amount of materials that he can actually give them. Now, that would help and benefit everybody, of course. But this would not be the end of whatever's going on at this moment, because they all would be sent back to UA. They would all be put back in dorms, or all be put into dorms. And now it is time for massive amounts of training. Izuku has shown that his level continues to rise, right? His skill level. And on top of that, and you talk about a one-on-one brawling fighter, someone that could go basically hand to hand, or, you know, sword to sword, whatever you want to call it, or fighting one person on 1 versus 1, he could definitely do that with his armor, with his resistance, with his with his skill, with the potions and so on. He could really do all of that, and he's able to kind of do all that, and on top of that, he's able to actually utilize monsters, creatures, summonings, basically. And Izuku shows that there really is no limit to what he can really do. And when they go on to actually get their provisional hero license, it's a totally different kind of ball game, because Izuku would be there and all these people think that they know what Class 1A can do, what Class 1A does, and how and what kind of weaknesses they have, but what they don't know is how much better they have gotten. Because when Izuku starts showing off what he can do, how fast he really is, how strong he really is, the summons that he can create, and basically the ability to utilize different things, well, they all begin to crumble. And when the first event begins and they have the little dodgeball, you got to tag people or tag the lights off the people, everybody around Izuku, well, let's just say in Class 1A, they pass almost instantly, because all these people that think that they can really, fight Izuku and take them on, they don't stand an absolute chance. Especially if Izuku starts whipping out some of the other creatures that he could truly utilize. For now, he's using some of the basic ones. Like he can use some wolves, or maybe he could use some iron golems. But if he wanted to get real sinister, he could start using some skeletons, some skeletons with armor, maybe some spiders and other creepers. Because let's be honest, these people aren't going to know how to deal with them, and frankly, they would be terrifying in real life as well. So they would be absolutely terrified when trying to fight these creatures. But Izuku and a lot of other people would pass pretty early on, heading on to the next round. Now, all of Class 1A would pass, and this would lead them to that next round, which would be more of a rescue-like portion. Now, this is perfect for Izuku, right? Izuku has a full kit of healing abilities. He can literally heal people. And on top of that, he can fly around scouting for them with his elytra. And then on top of that, he could literally use his blocks and other things and to help with structures, holding them up so people can get out, and creating a home base that is literally perfect and protected. And on top of that, he's able to literally help as many people as possible in a very short amount of time. Healing potions, levitation potions, resistance, anything you can think of, he can do it. He can do it all. And he's able to, be a really strong support hero. And that's the reality of it. Izuku is a extremely strong support hero. And he shows that off during this provisional hero license exam. And he shows it off immensely. Now, this support hero tactic thing, yes, it's awesome that he's a very great support hero. But what else can he do? Well, when the villains or the fake villains begin to arrive with Gang Orca, well, he shows off what he can really do in an actual fight. Now, let's make this clear. The whole All For One incident wasn't fully televised. I mean, you can't catch everything, and not many people know Izuku was too involved. They just know he was captured. So when Izuku begins to kind of, I wouldn't say eliminate, because that's kind of killing, but knocking out a large portion of Gang Orca's kind of fighting unit very quickly, it's a bit of a surprise, especially when he flies around dropping potions upon potions, weakening and softening up all the villains that are there, leading to Todoroki and Inasa to shoot a gust of wind and fire at them. But here's the thing. They kind of counteract each other. They're not working together. They're kind of messing each other up. And Izuku would be flying around looking at this, thinking that this is absolutely ridiculous. Genuinely ridiculous. He's about to do something and about to actually basically unleash some more creatures that could help him out. But fortunately enough, with one scream at them by Izuku, and Izuku yelling at them, telling them to stop messing this up, they would finally listen, and they would basically blow away all of the other villains and also entrap Gang Orca in a wind fire vortex. As they are trapped in there, or as he is trapped in there, Izuku makes sure that he actually can't be replenished and cannot get out of that vortex. Eventually, the timer and the bells or the alarms would begin ringing, and it would be officially over. The provisional hero license is now done. And let's just say Izuku got borderline a perfect score, doing absolutely everything and absolutely anything at a very, very, very high level. Izuku would benefit from from this majorly, especially because many heroes and agencies alike would see this and think that he is a great addition and would be a fantastic addition in almost every single aspect, right? Not just because he can create a bunch of resources and do this or do that and be a great support hero. He could be a top tier hero, like an actual action hero. So they begin to actually kind of bolster his stock up even more throughout this time. And eventually they would head back to UA, continue with a little bit of their training, and then begin speaking about something known as a work study. A work study will basically get you really in the door with how it feels to be in an agency and how it works. And, well, Mirio, Nejire, and Tamaki try to explain these things. Tamaki kind of is too shy to do so. Nejire, well, gets distracted too easily. But then Mirio decides, well, how about they just fight him then? That's the best way to go. That's the best way to do it. That they should just all fight him. In which that's exactly what happens. All of Class 1A. Every single one of them except for Izuku. And Aizawa makes it a very, very strong point that the kid is not going to fight him, because it's going to basically get rid of the lesson that is being made. In which Izuku says that I mean, if his quirk and his power is strong enough that he can defeat him, or that Mirio could possibly defeat him, but of course Aizawa tells him that he knows the kid. He'll get knocked down. He'll figure out how it works, and then he'll beat him. And then it'll all be bad because the whole statement that is trying to be made will be skewered. So he tells Izuku to sit down and just watch. That he's in trouble and that he's not allowed to do this because he fought, well, in that giant battle. In which Izuku looks at him and then kind of just shakes his head and shrugs his shoulders. As, well, there's nothing really he can do, or he's probably going to get the snot beat out of him by Aizawa. So he just watches as his whole class is absolutely dismantled. And as he's watching this, he does realize that in terms of power, yes, Mirio is fantastic. He's super strong. But in terms of resistance, Izuku can resist a lot of these things until he figures out how his quirk would work. In which it seems like Aizawa was right and probably made the better call. Now, while Izuku is being patient and waiting, he does get some good news after all this is said and done, because Mirio would even approach him saying that actually Sir Night-Eye wants to speak with him as soon as possible, and frankly he's really excited to hopefully work alongside him. In which Izuku will be shocked to hear this. You're telling me one of the top heroes is excited to work with me? In which Mirio nods his head, says yeah, he thinks that you do efficient, cutthroat work, and on top of that you bring so much more to the table than almost every single maybe active hero out there at the moment, which is kind of an interesting statement to think about, but that's the truth of it. He brings a lot to the table and he adds so much to any agency, and Izuku would then decide to work with Sir Night-Eye, of course, and work on what's coming next, which would be the kind of stopping of Overhaul and the Shia Hazaikai. They would have their introductions. They would speak to each other about what they expect from the agency, how they want to approach things, and who they're after, and that they're after Overhaul and the Shia Hazaikai, of course, and that they need to basically form a plan to find him. And of course, Izuku would agree to this and say that there's no issues, no problems, and that he is completely up to do this. And of course, Sir Night-Eye is happy to hear this because, well, they could use all the help they could possibly get, because it's been a while and they still have not found the guy. So they begin patrolling, they begin looking, they begin helping. But what they didn't expect is that Mirio and Izuku would go on one patrol, and that one patrol would take them right in front of the man they've been looking for and the man they've been hunting to stop for a long, long time. Overhaul, the leader of the Shia Hazaikai, is right in front of Izuku Midoriya and also Mirio Togata. But that is where we're going to end this part of What If Deku Had a Minecraft Quirk. Izuku Midoriya and Mirio Togata are in face-to-face with Overhaul. Overhaul stands there genuinely menacingly, And, well, the person that runs from Overhaul would be a little girl by the name of Eri. Eri would be scared, terrified, borderline just completely kind of losing her mind. At the end of the day, she would be freaking out, thinking that she's going to get other people or even herself hurt. She knows what happens. She knows, like, what's going on, and she knows that there's a lot of things attached to basically her being kidnapped and her being kind of hurt along the way. So she doesn't want these other people to be hurt as well. But Izuku Midoriya, all he's thinking about is a way to get Eri out of there ASAP. So really, Izuku's kind of thinking the opposite of what Mirio is at the moment, where Mirio is kind of thinking, well, let me calm the situation down, let me figure this out, let me stop what's happening, and let me also just, allow Overhaul to basically leave. And Izuku's not all about that. He's thinking to himself that all he wants to do is save this little girl, and he's going to do it by any means necessary. Like, straight up by any means necessary. So, he begins to contemplate, how is he going to do this? I mean, yes, he could immediately kind of leave, teleport away, right, with the girl, but it won't really help him to the degree that he needs to. Now, he has something that he has been thinking about for a while, something that is interesting, but he's not sure how it's going to work, and it's kind of been sitting there for, let's just say, quite a while. Now, Izuku has this plan right at UA, and it seems to be an interesting one, because he actually has a chamber that is currently having a floating ender pearl in it. And as it's sitting there, it's just waiting for one lever, one little pull, and well, what's going to happen is he's going to teleport there with whoever is with him, or whoever is kind of attached to him or he's holding. And he's thinking to himself, he could use it to save Eri for the most part, grab her, run away, whatever. But then he's leaving Mirio on his own. So how is he going to approach this? So he decides that he's going to do something a little bit different. He takes out a potion and he basically splashes it on Eri. Eri begins to levitate, and Izuku would jump in front of Overhaul. Overhaul would immediately tell him to stop what he's doing, like ASAP, or he's going to basically regret it and he would be, killed. In which Izuku, well, he's not afraid of him at all. He is all go, no breaks. He's ready to take on Overhaul if need be. But here's the thing. Now he's dealing with a totally odd scenario, and a different one at that, right? So he watches as Eri floats up, and immediately Overhaul will attack Izuku. Izuku would then throw an ender pearl as far as possible in the direction where he wants to go, and then he would try to duck Overhaul and grab him. As he grabs him, he would throw potions on him of slowness, weakness, anything he can, so that he can basically benefit from whatever Overhaul's feeling. Izuku would drink just a quick little kind of like bucket of milk, being that he actually can drink it pretty quick, which is ironic enough because it is a giant bucket of milk, but he's able to eat it or drink it very quickly, and he's able to have them or have his potion effects cleansed because he was too close to Overhaul in the first place. Then the pearl would land, and this would kind of disorientate Overhaul just a little bit. At the end of the day, this is a very odd thing to happen, and it's just something that he's not used to, right? He's definitely not used to some stuff like this. So it kind of just disorientates him a little bit, and they're closer to where the lever currently is. Izuku would throw another ender pearl. As it lands, Overhaul would try and touch Izuku once again, but as he does, he would only touch the armor that Izuku has, and it would only degrade it to a certain extent, the armor protecting Izuku massively from the quirk of Overhaul. And as this is a realization that Overhaul is having, he begins to realize that he needs to find a way to get through this armor. But as that next ender pearl would land, he would be very near the lever, throwing Overhaul toward the lever, and would then grab him once again, flying with his elytra, and would try to restrict his hands. He would smack the lever as they're both teleported to a different spot and a different place. And this place, well, is UA High School. But this place is something that they've been working on quite a bit, especially with the resources that Izuku has been providing them. This place is a quarantined area for heroes and also other people that eliminate your quirk entirely. So when Izuku gets there, they both no longer have their quirks, but Izuku's body is different. Izuku's body is already evolved to the point where he's already superhuman, and his quirk basically no longer affects him in that way. So he goes one-on-one with Overhaul in more or less a cage that is restricted with your quirk, the quirk no longer actually working, or your quirk no longer working. And he basically takes him on one-on-one, and he absolutely destroys him. Izuku puts him on the back foot immediately, and everybody begins converging. A lot of heroes converge on the area as well, and they're able to take down Overhaul, restrict him, and put him in a spot where he cannot come out of ever again, throwing him in prison and putting him away for good. But obviously they are dealing with some other issues, and Izuku is currently flying his way back to Eri to make sure that he can basically pluck her out of the sky. Now, luckily, there were people there, and they're watching her float up, and they're trying to construct some way to save her, in which Mirio is doing the same thing as well. But Izuku would come flying in with only seconds to spare, and Izuku would actually grab her out of the air and actually apologize to her for kind of allowing her to float up so high. She would ask what happened to Overhaul, then what happened to the crazy guy with the mask, in which Izuku says that he handled it, that she's safe now and nothing can harm her again. She would be absolutely shocked to hear this, but of course their job is not done just yet, and Izuku helps her get to the hospital, helps her get some healing and to feel better and stuff like that overall. But they also have to invade the Overhaul base, or the Shihazaikai base, which will be a lot easier now that Overhaul is already in prison. So they raid the base, and for the most part it goes pretty smoothly. Nobody's really a massive threat, and with Izuku there being able to bolster up all of his teammates and all of his fellow heroes, he's able to kind of give them strength, speed, resistance, and everything you can possibly think of. Literally everything you can possibly think of. Now, after all of these things are now benefiting them, and now that they're benefiting from those potion effects entirely, they're able to siege the base of the Shihazaikai, and they're able to take them down entirely, completely flattening the goals of Overhaul and flattening everything that the Shihazaikai has basically stood for. Now that the Shihazaikai is now done and in the dust, they go back on to basically doing normal hero school things, and that has a lot to do with Class 1A versus Class 1B. But we all know that Izuku in this fight, well, it's not going to be an easy one for Class 1B. Izuku is at a totally different level. There is no number or time of planning you could possibly do that could really put them on the same level. But guess what? Someone on, well, Class 1B is very interesting in this regard, being that of Monoma. Monoma's gonna be able to steal or utilize the quirk that Izuku has. But here's the thing. There's a lot more to Izuku's quirk than just stealing it. He would get the base idea of it, maybe being able to grab some different items or blocks, but being able to actually take Izuku's quirk and then utilizing it to its fullest extent, it's not going to work. It's not even going to be close. And it's not even going to be funny how badly he can mess up with it. Izuku would have, well, himself, he would have Mineta, he would have Mina, and also Ochako on his team. And he would splash them with strength, with speed, with resistance, with regeneration. Every potion that is positive for them, he would be utilizing. And he would be going against Class 1B, like Reiko, like Shota, like Monoma, like Yui Kodai, and also Shinso, who is trying to get into the class. A 4 versus 5 seems to be unfair, but let's be honest, it's unfair for the people who have 5. Because Izuku begins to spawn iron golems, begins to ride on a wither, and begins to just lay siege on them, knocking them out quicker than you could possibly imagine. and then tying them up, capturing them very easily as well, and teleporting them almost instantly with an Ender Pearl on his own. Izuku makes it look extremely easy and makes the entirety of this little 5-man group look like an absolute joke. But with this training session over and done with, we know that Izuku and the entirety of the class is going on to different ventures. Izuku continues working with Sir Night-Eye's agency, but also takes on some part-time with Endeavor's agency, working with Endeavor, Bakugo, and Shoto Todoroki, but also just working with as many people as possible. Now, Izuku benefits from journeying from agency to agency massively, right? He gets more notoriety, he gets a lot more famous, but also at the end of the day, he gets a lot more experience. Now, experience is very important, especially with what's coming up very, very soon. Because what they don't know is that in the shadows, currently Shigaraki is brewing up something that is terrifying. Shigaraki is brewing up something that could really take over the entirety of Japan. He is now intertwining himself with massive amounts of quirks. He is now basically gaining full control over Gigantomachia, and he has now more or less taken on the entirety of the Meta Liberation Front and now has them at his beck and call. So this fight, yes, it may be months away, but is a fight that is bound and destined to happen, and something that is going to be absolutely spectacular in terms of just an explosive battle. But now, when they learn of what's happening, and they learn that they need to be training and working and trying to figure out a plan, well, this is when Izuku learns of One for All, and when Izuku learns that Mirio Togata is the user of One for All, or the successor of One All Might. But this doesn't matter to him necessarily. Izuku knows that there's more to his quirk, and he has a couple months to figure it out. He needs to learn, he needs to figure it out, and he needs to know everything about it. Izuku tells them all that they need to utilize the chamber that cancels quirks entirely, and he needs to figure out a way to use it to perfection. Izuku would research, would look into, and try to learn as much as possible, eventually learning about commands. And this is when he would start inputting different things, different coding, and eventually he would learn of something that would revolutionize his own quirk and take over everything. Something world-shattering, something dimensional-shattering. He thought utilizing and using and being able to tame some of the monstrous creatures within Minecraft were gonna be enough. The Wither, the Ender Dragon, people or creatures like that, he is able to utilize them. But this is totally different. Something he couldn't even imagine, and he would go and utilize it and learn about it for the next months to come, and they would have a plan that would start with Izuku on the front lines, ready to take everybody on. He would line them all up with withers and ender dragons, people being able to ride them with saddles that were commanded in, and they were able to ride them to perfection and be able to kind of lay siege on any villains that need be. The villains have no idea what's coming and what's going to hit them, especially with a giant monster like Gigantomachia. The extra reinforcements of dragons and wizards are going to help massively. And on top of that, Izuku Midoriya has a plan to take down Shigaraki. And Shigaraki doesn't realize that he's about to hit a wall that is dimensional shattering, and a wall that cannot be climbed. Because Izuku would face down Shigaraki after they lay siege to a giant, basically army of Nomus and the Meta Liberation Front, and Izuku, Mirio, and also Bakugo would take on Shigaraki. But as the time would tick and as time would fade away, Mirio would look to Izuku to change the tide of the battle. And that would be one thing that he pulls out. He pulls out an iPad and he begins moving and typing things in. And as he does, he realizes something. He realizes that this right here, with one click, is going to be over. That everything that they now fight for, everything that they were ready and prepared for, he can finish this off But he knows that with that one click, he would become a murderer and someone he doesn't want to be. So he decides to change the command and to TP Shigaraki to a room isolated and a room contained where his quirks will no longer work and no longer be usable. Izuku clicks it and he teleports away. And for definite assurance, he would begin to actually get rid of Shigaraki's quirks entirely, commanding or using a command block and command strips to basically command Shigaraki's more or less body and entire kit of quirks to dissipate and disappear. Shigaraki would sit there in isolation trying to utilize anything, trying to break his way free, but he cannot. He is stuck, he is trapped, and he is no longer able to be a threat. The other bit of the army of Gigantomachia is now falling with the help of Midnight and with dragons and withers and creatures all alike, with the Meta Liberation Front falling short as always, and with them finally being captured by the heroes, and with the heroes standing tall on this day, everybody around the world is watching as Japan was able to fend off from one of the greatest villains alive. Or at least the protege of the greatest, or one of the greatest villains alive. Izuku Midoriya will have now carved his name into Japan's heroic future, and it seems like nothing will stop right now. Izuku's powers continue to transcend, and frankly, they're almost borderline godlike. Being able to control some of these things that are out within the world as if he can manipulate the actual law and order of the world is something that is to be awed at. And there's someone else in the United States that can do something similar, but just not on the scale that Izuku can really do it, or just maybe not the same way he could do it. Izuku Midoriya will continue down this path of hero work as he continues his studies at UA High School, and as rivalries would sprout out, and as the rankings would climb, and as Izuku would even gain and prosper his own agencies, his hero journey, well, it will continue on even past this story. But for now, this is where the story will end. And if you enjoyed, please show some love, leave a like, leave a sub, and leave a comment down below.